This is the final episode in the process of legging up the chair. When we're done here, this chair will be completed from the seat down and ready for us to begin on the chair back. We're going to install the H, putting it in place in the chair. But before we do that, we need some angles. And once again, the source for the angles is going to be the chair. I'm going to take a straight edge and put it across the legs. Basically the same concept as I did with the stretchers when I was calculating the center stretcher length. And there are my angles. This is one leg of the angle. The other leg of the front leg angle will be up the center line of this leg. The other leg of the rear leg angle will be up the center line of the rear leg. And so it's just a matter of setting bevel squares. Now we're once again in the situation where we're using two bevel squares. And our concern is confusing the bevel squares. This bevel square, the one with the long blade and the dark handle, I always use for front legs. This one I always use for rear legs. I never swap them, because that would undo the working habit that saves my bacon and prevents me from making mistakes due to confusion. I'm going to take the seat, I'm going to invert it, and I'm going to set it on a pair of backboards. Like that, and that's going to make it easier for me to work. I'm going to do the front leg first, so I take the front leg bevel square, and I take a front leg. And I lay it in the vise, once again checking to make sure that its center line is parallel to the jaw of the vise, because that's where I'm going to place the bevel square. Now, we've drilled the side stretchers. With a side stretcher, it doesn't matter how you place it in the vise. But with the leg, there is a distinct placement that you want to be aware of. It's quite possible to drill a hole the wrong way. To prevent yourself from doing that, we use this mnemonic. You won't drill a hole the wrong way if top of leg is to top of leg. Top of leg to top of leg, I'm in this position and I'm safe. Again, I'll drill the hole vertical, start it, and then pull down and check my angle. Now, did you notice when I was drilling that hole that I would drill a bit, then pull back up on the bit and drill some more? I'm drilling into maple. There's a lot of friction. It's possible, if I build up a mass of chips in the hole, that friction can actually create a glowing coal. Not a good idea in a wood shop to have glowing coals. So I pull the bit back out to relieve the chip and prevent it from clogging. Once again, we're going to do a wet fit. And once again, this will scare you. But if you fail to do it, you run into all kinds of problems. If you made a mistake on this hole, say you drilled it with a rear leg angle, rear leg bevel square, and then you do the other one, you'll repeat the problem. If you drilled it upside down and you do the other one, you'll probably repeat the problem. This way, you find problems in time to be able to correct them. And you test your work as you go. And here I am. I'm pointing at this scribe mark here, here, and here. So this leg is fine in the chair. I'm now going to drill a second leg, front leg. Glue in the hole, drill a hole, glue it, assemble it, and test it. That's the wet fit. And there we go. We're pointing at the rear legs. Everything's working. I collapsed this bevel square. Remember the tip I gave you? Only safe bevel square is one that is collapsed. You're not going to pick that up and use it by mistake. Now we're going to the rear leg holes. Okay, before we drill the two rear leg holes, we have to make a bit of an adjustment, and this is why. Remember that the front leg and the rear leg have distinct rake angles, with the rear rake angle being greater than the front. The problem as we increase the rake angle in the rear is that we're rotating this way. The risk is that if I drill the hole for this rear tenon, this rear joint, into the scribe line as I did on the front leg, that I'll end up with a side stretcher that's running uphill front to back. This is the problem. All the major planes in the chair are descending. To have one that is ascending is very disconcerting. So our goal is to have the stretcher run either parallel to the floor or even drop slightly. If we drill the rear joint at the same location as the front, we risk having that running uphill front to back. And this is how we're going to avoid it. This is how we're going to solve the problem of a side stretcher running uphill front to back and making sure it's parallel to the floor or slightly descending. These are two legs. This is the taper of the legs, this is the floor. We drilled the front hole this way by putting the lead on the scribe mark. It centers the hole. That's a front leg. The rear leg, we're going to treat just a tad differently. Instead of putting the lead on the scribe mark, we're going to put one of the spurs with the lead here. And that's going to drop the hole one radius of 5/8, so 5/16. And it compensates for any problem we'd have or anything that might cause the stretchers to run uphill front to back. Don't try to overthink this, just do it. It's like taking an aspirin. If you don't have heart problems, that aspirin's not going to hurt you. if you are going to have problems, the aspirin could save you. So think of this as taking an aspirin. Parallel to the jaw of the vise, top of leg to top of leg. Glue in the hole, swab it around, everything's going just as well as we could hope for. Final hole. That undercarriage is going to fit perfect in this seat. Next, we need to glue these 4 holes. Now this part is messy because the glue wants to run down the other side of the hole. And now we assemble. Make sure you have the seat, front of the seat facing toward you, and that you take the undercarriage with the front legs facing toward you. I've seen guys actually put the undercarriage on backwards. And now we'll tap it into place. Notice I'm not slamming away with the hammer. I'm simply tapping it in. A cone on the end of a leg functions like a wedge. Well, if you put 2 wedges in line and you drive on them, you're liable to separate the seat, split it in 2. That's a real problem in in legging up, and something to always be cautious of. It is very possible to split the seat. But there we go. We're ready now to wedge those legs. Next step, we're going to wedge these tenons. They project a little higher than I would like them to, so I'm going to trim them. I'm not going to try to cut them flush, I just want to cut them closer to the seat. That one is about as low as it's going to be. I'm going to make wedges to wedge these tenons. And the wedges have a particular shape. Let me make one and I'll show it to you. There's the wedge. It tapers on both surfaces as you'd expect a wedge, but notice that it also tapers this way, so it has almost this shovel shape. This is more narrow than the end of the tenon. So as I drive the wedge into the seat, it's going to expand and it's going to bite into the surrounding wood, creating a key that will help overcome the racking forces that might loosen that joint. Notice too that I'm not making little short individual wedges. That's very inefficient. Instead, I use one long piece, I'll drive it in, cut it off, shape another wedge. We're going to wedge these tenons, and I'm going to do it on the floor, sitting in front of the seat. I'm going to use a chisel to make splits in the ends of the tenons. Notice that we didn't make a saw curve beforehand. If I had done that, I would have to worry about the orientation of the saw curves to the holes. That'd be the first problem. The second is that the wedge would first have to fill the saw curve before it could do the job of spreading the tenon. So I'm going to do it with a chisel. And I'm going to, let me show you how. Okay, a couple of things. The wedges are going to have to run front to back. The grain of the seat runs side to side. If I were to orient the wedges the same way, I'm probably going to split the seat. The second thing I want to be conscious of is to wedge down the axis of the leg. In other words, I want to be trying to do this. And then I drive the tenon, the chisel enough to actually separate the tenon. The wedge won't do it for me. I have to use the chisel to do it. So once again, front to back, down the axis of the leg, make a true split. There we go. We take our wedge, we put a little glue on it. We don't want it backing itself out due to seasonal movement. This will hold it in place. Put the wedge in the split and then start to drive. Now you want to listen to this. Hear that change in tone? As long as the wedge is still traveling. It's vibrating. The tone is high. When it is seated, the tone drops because the whole unit is now vibrating. Not a good idea to vibrate that unit. Splitting a seat is a real concern. Make another wedge. Glue on the wedge. Now this time, notice the hammer and how I am striking that wedge. If you notice, I'm not looking here. It's not uncommon for me to miss the wedge and hit my hand. I'm watching down here. If this seat were going to split, a small crack, no bigger than an eyelash, will start here. If you see that, time to stop. Don't go looking, waiting for the, don't try to obtain the drop in tone. Just stop. There we go. And one final time. And just a word about the hammer I'm using. This is a chair maker's framing hammer. The process of putting a chair together is called framing. And traditionally, chair makers used a double-faced hammer because it didn't matter which way you picked it up, it was ready to go. That's it, 4 wedges. Okay, we're going to cut the seat to get the 4 legs in contact with the bench top, and that's what's going to take care of this problem. Now, first step, I want to make sure the seat is level side to side. So I'm going to measure from the groove on the vertical. Here I've got 18 5/8. Here I've got 18 11/16. Ordinarily I wouldn't worry about a 1/16 of an inch, but I want to be able to show you how one would level a chair that was not as level as this one is. A wedge goes under the short side to boost it up. There you go, 18 11/16, 18 11/16. I'm now level side to side, and I'm going to concern myself with lowering the seat to the height that I want it to be. The dimensions are on your dimension sheet that you get when you download the seat template, but they are 17.5 in the front and 17 in the back. Now that measurement is measured from the top of the bench to the top of the seat. So chair makers measure top to top is the little mnemonic we used to use. And I'm going to measure, I'm at 18 3/4. Now, this is the risk. If I use math to figure out what I'm going to trim, and I make a mistake, it's pretty irreversible. So I'm going to use a method that is mathless. Pretend you're going on a trip. You go out to Google Maps, and you want to find out how long the trip is. The computer's going to ask you 2 questions. Where are you? Where do you want to go? Same thing here. Where do we want to go? Well, we know we want to go to 17 and a half and 17. Question is, where are we? Once again, I'm measuring 18 3/4. And this is how I'll do this to cut back on the possibility of error. I take my compass, I set one point at 17 and a half where I want to go, and I extend the other leg of the compass out to 18 and a half, which is where I am. There you go. Automatically, we're set to what we need to take off. And I'm simply going to scribe a line around the leg. There we go. Now, the back of the seat is essentially another trip. So, computer asks me, where am I? Where do I want to go? I know I want to go to 17. And I'm measuring 18 and a half. So that's where I am, and I know I want to go to 17. Now, notice that this one's in the air. I leave that hanging. There we go. Now I cut on those lines. I'm going to cut the legs on the lines that we traced with the compass. I use a Japanese Suzuki because the handle is in a line and my wrist isn't broken. And there we go. One last step, we're going to trim the ends of these tenons, and that will wrap up legging up. Okay, we're getting really close to done. The next to last thing we're going to do here is trim the ends of these tenons. To trim the ends of the tenons, I'm using a firmer gouge. A firmer gouge is a heavy-duty gouge that can be driven. It's double hooped. It's a very shallow sweep. It's a number 3 sweep. And it prevents, by using a curved cutting edge, I avoid digging into the edge of the seat as I would do if I tried to use a flat chisel. Now, I have had chips. I'm going to be working very close, and I've had chips fly up and hit me in the eye. So I like to wear a pair of safety glasses when I do this. The action is going to be to come in from all sides up to the center, and then when it's domed, go across and take out the center. Notice my elbow is holding the chair so it's not walking around on me. We're essentially complete. We've got some cleanup that we want to do. The legging up process has made some scratches in the seat, and I want to sand those out. But before I do, I'm going to take a water bottle and I'm going to moisten the seat, and allow it to dry. That'll raise the grain, and so these scratches will come up flush and can be sanded away. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take some 60 grit sandpaper and I'm going to round these edges here, just to give them a finished edge. Once I've done that, we've legged up a chair. Thank you for watching this content. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. And check back frequently for more Windsor chair making tips and tutorials.